The natural order is collapsing. Mysterious crystals are spreading throughout the land, ravaging all forms of sentient life. Monsters are going rabid and face extinction, disrupting the ecosystem. As the heir to the throne of the Kingdom of Azuria and captain of the Rangers, an elite group that safeguards the development and preservation of monster wildlife, you heed the call to unravel the source of the calamity. Embroiled with increasing tensions with the neighboring kingdom of Vermeil, you set out on a journey to prevent a war between the two kingdoms, discover and traverse the new lands, and save the world from its inevitable destruction. Welcome to Monster Hunter Stories 3 Twisted Reflection. As my first game into the spin off franchise, I will straight up say that I had an amazing time. I tried many times to get into the mainline Monster Hunter games, but I simply do not have the patience for them. This turn based iteration, on the other hand, is more up my alley. With a greater emphasis on storytelling, timeless cel shaded art style, and strategic gameplay, Monster Hunter Stories 3 has proven to be an impressive JRPG, so let's dive right in. Unlike most traditional turn based JRPGs, where you meticulously manage your resources to reach the boss at the end of a level, Monster Hunter Stories 3 features tight gameplay in every battle. You don't need to save your party's mana pool, you don't need to save up your healing items, and you definitely don't need to skimp on your strongest abilities for only the toughest enemies. Instead, you will need to fight with everything you have in each fight. Regular monsters in the field can often be formidable if you're not careful. Your HP restores in full after each battle, and the stamina gauge is utilized rather than the conventional mana pool of most games in the genre. The stamina gauge also slowly regenerates per turn, encouraging you to use appropriate abilities depending on the situation. You will also need to be tactical with your item consumption. Even let's say you have 99 potions, you can only use a limited quantity per battle, so no item spam abuse. The same goes with your strongest attacks. The game emphasizes targeting the right body parts of monsters and using the right weapons and abilities. Brute forcing your way can go very wrong. Monster Hunter Stories 3 offers a good variety of weapons. There's the great sword that allows you to charge it to unleash heavy attacks, the longsword to execute combo techniques, the hammer that specializes in breaking most enemy parts and staggering enemies, the hunting horn that is support oriented by casting buffs to your party, the bow that is focused on inflicting status effects, and the gun lance that fires shells and gives defensive maneuvering abilities such as taunting. As a starting point, I recommend experimenting to determine which weapons will be your choice. There is no right or wrong answer, as it will all depend on your playstyle. For the bare minimum, have at least two preferred weapons. Though in combat you can equip three, I ended up prioritizing the hammer and the bow, because some monsters are strong against one particular weapon, so the quickest solution is to simply swap to another weapon. In the late game, I began using advanced tactics with swapping weapons, where I used my hammer's ability to take a defensive position and will cause my character to counterattack if the enemy targets me. I then swapped back to my bow to apply status effects like poison and stun. So early in the game, focus on tinkering with the weapons and determine which are your favorites. Using the right weapons is crucial to take down enemy monsters. In particular, your weapons excel in breaking certain parts. You can target which portion of a monster you want to attack, and the UI tells you which is the best weapon to equip. So again, simply mashing the attack button is never a good idea. You need to be methodical in which weapon and abilities to use, as well as the attacks and arsenal of your companions. I also performed advanced tactics in the late game, such as stacking poison and burn effects simultaneously and buffing my party with regeneration and increased evasion rates. On the positive side, proper usage and timing of your attacks, along with coordinating with your allies, will result in your party dominating the battle. Successfully destroying enemy parts gives you advantages such as enemies having a much lower defense and restriction from using some of its stronger attacks. In combat, to bring enemies' HP down to zero, you will mainly need to deplete what is called the Wyvern Soul Gauge. This gauges their stamina or fighting spirit, which upon depletion will cause them to stagger and skip their turn. And when they are staggered, you will have the opportunity to trigger a fully coordinated team attack called Synchro Rush, which is much more powerful than your regular attacks and more importantly, greatly contributes to another resource called the Kinship Gauge. The Kinship Gauge is a resource that allows your character, the rider, to ride your monster, or in this spin-off game, are called monsties, when it is full. There are numerous benefits with the Kinship Gauge that offer more strategic depth as you progress in the game. The most obvious benefit of riding your monstie is fully restoring the HP of both the rider and the monstie. All debuffs and status effects will also be removed. Later on in the game, there will also be advanced strategies such as the need to ride your monstie to survive a powerful attack. But ultimately, the biggest reason for you to prioritize maxing out your kinship gauge and riding your monstie is for you to execute what is called a kinship skill. A kinship skill is your ultimate attack that deals massive damage depending how full your kinship gauge is. And if you simultaneously execute it with your comrade who is also riding their monstie, it then becomes what is called a double kinship attack. Suffice to say, it really boils down to if you manage to efficiently fill up the kinship gauge and unleash kinship attacks, then you are on the right track of playing the game properly. It takes some getting used to, especially if this is your first entry to the franchise, but I promise you, you will pick up everything in good time. Another combat feature that makes its return in Monster Hunter Stories 3 is the head to head engagement. Head to head engagement is when you and an enemy target each other. The victor in this engagement is determined by a rock, paper, scissors mechanic, depending on the attack type of both parties. The attack types are power, technical, and speed, where power beats technical, technical beats speed, and speed beats power. The tricky part in these engagements is to determine which attack type the enemy will utilize, which are numerous factors such as monster type, behavior, phases, and many more. Admittedly, even as of this recording, I do not have a full mastery of this mechanic, but I do believe that this was intentionally designed to keep players on alert. There were times that the head to head engagement turned the tide of battle, but on the other hand, there were times that it led to my demise. And that about wraps up the fundamentals of combat, and I know it can be overwhelming, but again, I want to reiterate that it's fine, that's natural, and you will get everything as you progress and play the game. I started playing the game without having any idea what I was doing, and I kept getting tutorial pop-up after tutorial pop-up. You can always open the menu if you need to read them again. And the game's pacing is designed in such a way that you can take your time until you get used to all of its mechanics. To put it simply, I explained all of this to you to prove that there's plenty of depth in this game. Simply spamming your best abilities or exhausting your best items will not be sufficient for you to finish the game. Trust me, that is not the case at all. So with the combat fundamentals done, let's talk about exploration and progression. Navigating around the game world is well implemented. It is quite vast, but not open world big, where it can be very overwhelming. Instead, priority was given to its clever design, similar to many modern platforming games today. I found myself wanting to explore every nook and cranny and loot to my heart's content. If you're a loot goblin that wants to take everything you see, this game definitely fills that void. You will never be encumbered by simply grabbing all of it. And it is very rewarding as returning back to town or camp with your haul gives you access to forging and upgrading equipment and crafting potent items to aid you on your journey. So my advice as you start exploring the world is to grab and grab and grab everything you find. There's simply no reason for you not to do this. On top of looting, I had a great time with the game's traversing and platforming mechanics, something not many JRPGs nowadays prioritize or even implement. You can travel the land with a party of 6 monsties. Each monstie has a unique attribute in exploration. For example, some monsties are able to wall climb, while others can swim, and some are even able to dig underground to reach new areas. You will need to retrieve a wide roster of monstie types to be able to reach all areas of the map. Another indirect effect of this is that it balances out your monstie lineup in battle. Since you can take 6 monsties in combat, you will probably think as a newcomer, oh, then I will just bring 6 of my strongest monsties so I can dominate the battlefield. Well, that is a yes and a no, because exploration does balance out and diversify your monstie lineup. For example, you can't just simply fill your party with one monstie type that can't swim when you need to cross the sea at some point in the game, or when you need to climb a wall to reach a particular area. It is simply not advisable, or at least early in the game. Point being, the different exploration functions of your monsties hits 2 birds in 1 stone. 1, it makes exploration more immersive, and 2, it acts as a balancing mechanic for your monstie lineup. However, eventually, you can create the strongest monsties while maintaining all the exploration functions, but I will explain that later. For now, let's talk about monster dens and monster eggs. A core feature of the Monster Hunter Stories games is the retrieving of monster eggs to obtain new monsties, and Monster Hunter Stories 3 is no different. It is as straightforward as it sounds. To obtain new monsties to your party, you will simply need to enter a monster den scattered throughout the world and retrieve the monster eggs. What monster egg you will obtain is RNG dependent along with many other factors such as location, monsties in the ecosystem, if you defeated the monster residing in the den, the rarity rating of the monster den, and many more. It can get very addictive to grab eggs, especially the RNG is set up in such a way that you can still get very rare eggs in common dens. So you're encouraged to keep finding dens and keep grabbing eggs as much as you can. But you can also increase the odds of getting the particular monster eggs that you want through what is called the habitat restoration. Habitat restoration is the process of setting your monsties free back into the wild to restore the ecosystem. This will result in stronger variants of the monsties for you to retrieve in their dens. Monsties are ranked from unranked, C, B, A, and S rank. The higher the rank, the stronger the monstie is with its stats and abilities, so it is optimal to keep releasing monsties until they reach the S rank in the ecosystem. As you progress in the game and unlock new levels, you will also have access to new locations to set your monsties free, opening the door to new strategies on how you want to develop them. Depending on which monster you release and where, you can also unlock new variants of that monster through mutation. Mutation creates the same monster but with different abilities and attributes, and in many instances, their color changes as well. Some monsters will evolve to a different variant with completely new elements and attacks, while others, given the right area and combination of monsters you release, result in a more powerful version of the monster. At the end of the day, it boils down to experimentation and reiteration to obtain the best monsters that you want in your party. Like the combat, habitat restoration has a lot of depth. I easily got hooked trying to discover new monsters and getting their best versions. And to further reinforce the feature, there are enemies you take on called feral monsters, and new to Monster Hunter Stories 3, the invasive monsters. Feral monsters are stronger versions of monsters outside of its normal habitat that have gone rabid and have taken over a portion of the map as its domain. Your task is to strike them down to unlock a new area for habitat restoration. Charging in unprepared against these beasts is a bad idea and will likely lead to your demise. In my playthrough, I even went as far as to only start actively hunting them down close to the end of the story, so I wouldn't have too much of a difficult time. The same applies for invasive monsters, which are also monsters that have gone rampant, but for this case, they only appear at night, and you can't charge them head on initially, as they are literally invulnerable. Instead, what you need to do first is to play the role of a detective and gather clues from its surroundings on how to make them retreat back to their den. This entails meeting a certain condition when facing them in the first battle. I have to be clear that these invasive monsters are the strongest monsters in the game, so you're not meant to defeat them at least in the early game. So that's a pro tip if you're highly considering getting this game. Or at least I'd like to think that's the case if you're watching this video. After the invasive monster retreats to its den, you're able to retrieve the egg of endangered species without necessarily having to fight them again. Endangered species are monsters that you never had access to previously because they were being held captive by the invasive monsters. So the primary reason for you to search for invasive monsters is to free these endangered species for them to be available in the ecosystem. It's a cool new feature for the franchise that is very creative and provides additional challenge. It is also worth noting that defeating these invasive monsters yield good loot such as materials for better equipment and stronger versions of rider abilities. And unlike feral monsters, invasive monsters can be fought repeatedly in their respective dens should you wish to farm and grind for more materials. Feral and invasive monsters are the toughest fights in the game, so always go in prepared if you decide to pursue them. If you're looking to play this game more casually and just go through the main story, the good news is beyond their tutorial introduction, these fights are optional. But I recommend to at least try to fight some of them as these can be challenging and fun. And the best way to overcome them, on top of leveling up and upgrading your equipment, is the rite of channeling. This is also where you can develop the best monsters without sacrificing your exploration functions. The rite of channeling is where the magic happens, where you unleash the full potential of your monsters. Every monster has active and passive abilities called genes, and each monster can carry up to 9 genes. The rite of channeling is where you can swap out the genes between two monsters. In Monster Hunter Stories 3, the process has been streamlined. If you want a gene from another monster transferred to one that you are using, or if you simply want to dispose one in exchange for a gene that is far more useful, it is very straightforward. In the menu, you can simply just switch it out between the two monsters. In the previous games, the monster giving its genes had to be sacrificed, but that is no longer the case for the sequel. This is a big quality of life improvement as it encourages experimentation without the tedium of having to obtain the eggs of the monster you lost to try again. So you're free to keep mixing and matching abilities to your heart's content until you create the ultimate build. You are also incentivized to do optimal placement of genes according to their element and type, as doing so will result in what is called a bingo, which gives stat bonuses to your monsters if you place and arrange the genes correctly. The only restriction of the rite of channeling is some gene slots will be locked if a monster's level is too low, but this can easily be rectified in two ways. One is to level up the monster until you reach the required level, or unlock the slot using an item called the Catalyst Key. And even with those restrictions, it is still very easy to get past them, especially in the late game. Catalyst keys can be purchased from merchants, and leveling up is very fast. You just need to have the monster in your party and fight higher leveled enemies. You don't even need to use the monster in battle as long as it's in your party. It will have a share of the experience points and will catch up in level very quickly. In a nutshell, the rite of channeling is the key to make the most overpowered monsters in the game. And in Monster Hunter Stories 3, it is made more accessible and fun. I spent a good amount of time tinkering and researching genes to dominate in battle. I am guilty of wanting to be overpowered. So yeah, I did get sucked in for quite some time. So with the habitat restoration combined with the rite of channeling, I was able to give my Rathalos S-rank burning and poisoning abilities through obtaining S-rank monster eggs and using the rite of channeling to obtain S-ranked abilities. There are two other methods to further enhance your party. The first being very straightforward is cooking. where your party eats food to gain passive boosts in exploration and combat, usually with increases in stats, buffs, and resistances. The second method is sending monsties to excursions. It is similar to letting them go in habitat restoration, except the monster you send out returns, learning new environmental passive skills. And those are the fundamentals of the gameplay of Monster Hunter Stories 3. Again, if this is your first time like me, it can be overwhelming, but trust me, over time, you'll be able to gradually master all of them. It took a while for me to get a grasp of all of the mechanics. Don't worry, the game will never soft lock you, so take your time. Plus, there are plenty of side quests for you to partake to slowly master everything the game throws at you. And when it all finally comes together, you will get hooked. With the gameplay complete, another critical component of a great JRPG is a compelling story. And Monster Hunter Stories 3's narrative, I can say, is strong. Centuries after the second game, Monster Hunter Stories 3 begins with a calamity that has struck the world called the Crystal Encroachment. This is causing lands and all forms of life to be crystallized that is rapidly spreading across the land, wreaking havoc to ecosystems, livelihoods, and the natural order. You are the prince or princess of the Kingdom of Azuria, as well as the captain of the Rangers, a group responsible for the preservation and development of monster wildlife. On the surface, this seems like a run-of-the-mill story, but Capcom took a step further by adding political intrigue and moral gray areas throughout the narrative. As heir to the throne, you are caught in the middle of rising political tensions between the rival kingdom of Vermeil, with their people's lives greatly suffering from the encroachment. The Vermilions believe that the answers to stopping the encroachment lies in the Forbidden Lands, and to reach them safely, they will have to pass Azurian territory, which Azuria is prohibiting to uphold a 200-year-old covenant to prevent another war. As you can imagine, the plot is not simply black and white, where there's an evil kingdom hungry for blood, power, and wealth, but rather it has some nuance, and that I find is impressive for a monster capturing game. Without diving too much into spoilers, events transpire that lead you and your comrades to cross the forbidden territory, discover new lands and people that have been suffering from the encroachment, and uncover that not all is as it seems. And to complement the main story, you're also able to undertake side quests from your companions, which also serves as their respective story arcs. Each of your companions has their own subplot that enriches the narrative. You get to experience their backstories, struggles, and development. They tackle heavy themes such as friendship, loss, understanding cultures, maturity, and more. While these side chapters are optional, I strongly recommend you complete all of them as they greatly complement the storytelling, as well as enhance your companions in gameplay, such as new and enhanced weapons and access to more monsties. Each of their stories are well written and will tug your heartstrings the JRPG way. In summary, the storytelling of Monster Hunter Stories 3 also has some depth to it. Capcom could have easily gotten away by telling some half-baked kid story, but instead they chose to go the extra mile by adding mature themes, and that to me deserves commendation. And just as impressive as the game's storytelling are the game's iconic cel-shaded visuals. Unlike the mainline Monster Hunter games, Monster Hunter Stories 3 distinguishes itself with its cel-shaded aesthetics, and like clockwork in this channel, if you watched my past videos, you already know what I think about the subject matter. I will always prefer this art style over photorealistic visuals, simply because it will hold its appeal over time. Even a decade from now, it will look just as pleasing as it is today. The Monster Hunter Stories games have been more lighthearted in its tone, and the graphics still reflect that in this third entry. The color palette is bright and vivid, especially with the major character models. Especially, of course, the detailed textures in the monster models. This is, after all, a Monster Hunter game, so the design of the creatures will absolutely not disappoint. Another great aspect of the visuals, and I already touched on this a little bit earlier, and that is the level design. I mentioned that the maps are a delight to explore, and another contributing factor to that is the outstanding level design. Whether you're exploring the flora and fauna of the forests, navigating the rocky and desolate wasteland, climbing the frosty mountains, delving deeper into caves, or getting lost in the lush vegetation of the tropical island, it is all eye candy as far as the eye can see. The particle effects are also pleasing to look at, with bright various colors, all while maintaining consistent, stable frame rates. But definitely the best looking visual effects in the entire game are without a doubt the kinship attacks. On top of it being visually pleasing, the animations are just so well executed. It still looks amazing despite me seeing it hundreds of times. Words can't give it justice, so just check it out for yourself.
Let's do this! Yeah! We got you!
The graphics of Monster Hunter Stories 3 will not disappoint. and definitely significant amount of resources were allotted to make it the best that it can be. And speaking of production values, Capcom also did not spare any expense with the game's audio design. The sound design of Monster Hunter Stories 3 is also well done. The soundtrack is well composed, and the voice acting performance is great. The music is spot on depending on the mood of the narrative and situation, whether it's a heartwarming or intense dark foreboding cutscene or an intense battle. As for the voice acting, each voice actor did their best to bring the characters to life, most especially the party and the major supporting characters in the game. And rather me trying to articulate it, I might as well just show it on screen and experience it for yourself.
Are you sure about this? I mean, we did slay the monsters back there, which technically entitles us to the proceeds.
You just might be right. Still, Lady Amara would have done the same. Though without the reward, I guess this just amounts to a simple spelunking trip.
And you agree with this, Your Highness?
Of course I do. After all, my mother always told me not to prioritize the present, and to instead make my choices with a focus on the future.
Just imagine, what if those kids find the success they're looking for and go on to help other people in turn? Wouldn't that be awesome? And hey, you never know. What if they come save us somewhere down the line? Stranger things have happened.
A focus on the future. I like that. It's hopeful.
And these are the reasons why I believe that this third entry to the Monster Hunter spin-off franchise is great. The combat, monster raising, and exploration have very in-depth gameplay that offer new, unique, and streamlined features. The story attempts to go the extra mile by diving deeper into gray areas with political intrigue despite being a monster capturing game. The cel-shaded visuals are vivid and pleasing to look at that will stand the test of time while maintaining excellent performance. Audio design is spot on with well-composed soundtracks and great performance by the voice actors. Monster Hunter Stories 3 Twisted Reflection is without a doubt one of the best turn-based JRPGs that pays tribute to its predecessors with a captivating experience. And that concludes this video. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed the content, do consider subscribing or check out my other videos to see if I deserve your subscription. I know it's been quite some time since I last uploaded a video in this channel. It's been a very busy late last year to me up until this point. I'll try to be more consistent moving forward. So again, thank you for watching if you've made it this far, and I hope to see you next time.
Yeah.